Hi guys, you're listening to Soul Talk, and just want to tell you a little bit about the video that we're here to present to you. It was a journey down to Sarasota, Florida to meet Dr. Rebecca Merz. She works at Mind Spa down in Sarasota. And the purpose of the interview was to talk to her about the Psychomanteum and the work she does down there with the Psychomanteum. And as a result, we were just going with the flow, and we walked in the door, and Justin went in to experience the Psychomanteum, and the idea was that he would go in and experience and talk about it. But how I met Rebecca is I met her at the Raymond Moody conference back in February of 2012 at the Unity on 4th Street in St. Petersburg. It was kind of an interesting way I met her, and she kind of just flowed right next to me, and it was in a crowded room, and she actually came there and sat right next to us. This whole space was actually opened up with all people walking by and not paying attention to the spot, and she ended up sitting down next to me. And it was just really in the flow, and my friend Virginia and I were sitting there, and we just really connected with her, and as a result she gave me her card and wanted to connect up with me and have me experience the Psychomanteum. And I'd never heard of the Psychomanteum previous to this. So in May, I drove down there and experienced being in the Psychomanteum, and I had a profound experience. I was in there for 45 minutes and got to actually communicate with my transitioned mother, from the spirit world, and get a lot of clarity going on for other things in my life. And what was really interesting about it is that Dr. Merz actually sits outside of the room and writes down what's coming to her. And when we go out and we consult about it, she actually sits down and tells you what she sees, and then we cross-compare it, and it was identical. Just slight variations, but what we were talking about is very similar. The messages she was getting and the messages I was getting. And basically the idea of the Psychomanteum is to connect with the spirit realm or a higher state of consciousness, to expand your consciousness and get the answers to questions. And it was a profound experience, and I wanted to catalog this and experience so that other people could hear about it and maybe even create one themselves, or come down and experience it with Dr. Merz and her setup down at Mind Spa down in Sarasota. And it stems from the ancient Greeks, but then Dr. Raymond Moody is the one that actually brought it to the forefront in the modern day world based on his work with near-death experiences and shared death experiences. And so I hope you enjoy this documentary, and I hope you enjoy the information that's presented to you, because it's definitely some profound information, and we'll be doing more of this with Soul Talk. Talk to us about your experience you just had. You said there's an altered state of consciousness.
I just sat with Justin doing a Psychomanteum session, and while he was in the mirror gazing process, I sit outside of the room and just did stream of consciousness, meditation, journaling, and holding the intention for the space, and I get in kind of an altered state. I guess I'm usually joining with the person in their experience, and we just discussed what happened while he was mirror gazing. So it was, I guess to describe it right now, I feel like, wow, it's bright in here. I've been into kind of a more internally focused state and processing and integrating information with the question that he went in with.
Very cool. And so what is the Psychomanteum?
So the Psychomanteum is a mirror gazing technique that was developed in ancient Greek times. It's used for divination of souls is what it translates as. I don't speak ancient Greek, but it basically was an oracle of the dead. People would go there kind of as a pilgrimage to find out information from the deceased. And Raymond Moody studied this and brought it into contemporary times as a way to try to contact deceased loved ones to help with grief.
So now I know we met through the Raymond Moody conference, and what got you started on his work? Because your doctorate's in transpersonal psychology. Does that relate, or is it?
So Raymond Moody is well known for near-death experiences, for being one of the first to study them and bring it into the mainstream. And transpersonal psychology studies experiences that move one beyond a sense of the limits of one's ego, connecting to something beyond oneself. I was there at Institute of Transpersonal Psychology and needed to take a research course, and the Psychomanteum was being studied kind of in a lab setting, and I decided that it was intriguing and interesting, even though I had a complete fear of wanting to experience an apparitional experience. I had no desire to go through the process myself. And through my experiences of being a research coordinator and watching people come in with so much grief and then go through this 3 to 4 hour process and come out completely in a transformed state, and then knowing that with the follow-up interviews that state lasted, that something permanently changed and transformed in their grieving process was moving enough for me to want to start practicing it, to bring it out of the research realm and offer it.
And start practicing it as a session. So it's interesting. So they actually go in. It's not just about kind of connecting with the deceased or the souls. Literally, it's a window into their soul. They can transform as a result of looking in there. If I'm understanding you correctly, they transform when they're in there. So it's expansion of consciousness potentially in their session. It's not just about connecting with other souls. It could be about connecting with their soul. Am I understanding?
You know, I kind of leave it up to the interpretation of the individual that is going through the process, what their psyche, their soul brings forward. So there's different levels of, I have my assumptions and my beliefs about what's going on. However, that's one way of thinking about it, that the process of going and mirror gazing, so that I didn't explain that. The mirror, you don't see your own reflection. It's a darkened room. A psychomantium is a darkened room with a mirror at one end that's tilted, so it reflects the surrounding darkness. There's just a very low level light.
What I found interesting is when I did my psychomantium with you, and I walked out very expanded, and my consciousness was very expanded. But I went in with the intention to be able to connect with my deceased mother. And what I did, but I got more of an expansion of consciousness. And the healing process came from understanding more about the death process. And so what I'm kind of like, that's where I'm kind of gaining some perspective, because I saw the mirror, but I didn't see my reflection, but I saw the reflection back into my soul and the spirits that came from it. And so I just, that's kind of what I was asking you.
I think your experience is what your psyche provided for you, and certainly people go and have that level of experience where it's providing an expansion of consciousness and an understanding on a spiritual realm or a level of, is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah.
And I've had participants go through and have very concrete experiences of what course should I take next semester, and grandma coming through and giving very practical advice, and so less about the existential or cosmic level of healing and more just practical day-to-day kind of information coming through. Or on a different level, I think what you're asking too, some people go through and get a different perspective, a shift of perspective completely, even if they don't feel a contact with the deceased loved one. So it is a relationship to one's
So that's exactly what the ancient Greeks used it for. The oracles used it to be able to see and get answers.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So you've been doing this work for a while. You've been at least a couple of years now.
8 years, actually.
Wow. Okay. So what are some amazing effects you've seen? I mean, you told a story about earlier when we weren't doing the interview about a lady that went into the bathroom and then she came back and she had a huge shift. Any other huge shifts that you
Sure. I wrote my dissertation on the process, so there's a lot of examples in that. You can find it online as well. Some of the more general themes that I find kind of profound and intriguing. Sometimes people go in seeking contact with one deceased loved one and someone else shows up. We can't really explain that, but they have a whole other experience than what they expected. And I find that oftentimes what is transformative about the process and meaningful is that it is unexpected, it's unknown. We don't know what's going to happen, and it's never what you think is going to happen in there. Meaning in the Psychomanteum room itself during the mirror gazing process. But the person that shifted the most during the research, he had a history of, his father had abused him, and he went through the process with the intention of really trying to understand the abuse and come to terms with it and hear from his father and try to resolve, why was I abused, why didn't you love me? And I'm getting chills when I say this. His experience was very profound in that while he was mirror gazing, he began to see, he became his father. He began to see things through his father's eyes as though a movie were playing. He experienced his father's emotions and internal state, and through becoming his father during the mirror gazing process, he had a big shift and a completely different understanding about why he was abused and the limitations his father had, and it was very healing for him. So it didn't make, I guess when we talk about grief resolution and grief therapy, it's not thought of as like, oh, it's resolved and it's gone, it's over, and you don't feel the feelings anymore, but rather that you've adapted to the loss in a way that you can function better.
So he saw his father's perspective, and even though the abuse was still happening, he shifted because he understood his dad's emotional state or whatever.
Yeah, and it's hard to, when we talk about it and put language to these things, sometimes for me, it can turn into a thinking type process, but every person that I've sat with has had, through this process, has had an embodied shift. It's something that happens on many levels. It's multidimensional. It's not just a thought, or I guess my point being that his shift was embodied. He embodied becoming his father in a way that provided him information that wasn't just having an insight or a thought about it. Not that insights don't come as well.
Experienced it.
Yeah, he experienced it.
Okay.
And oftentimes people report kind of a kinesthetic shift or energy shift, or like a subtle energy shift in and around their bodies. Or that with the insight there comes some kind of other embodied experience of whatever's coming through.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What I find fascinating about it, and this kind of getting me excited, is that it literally takes you into this experience and just kind of explain to you that the room is dark. Mm-hmm. Your senses are deprived, I would say. That's the word I would use. Mm-hmm. And that's probably a strong word, but and then you really just focus in on the quietness, and it stills your body, and so that you can have an experience outside of this physical state, and in connection. That's the experience I had. And so, I mean, other people might have it, but it's what I guess the point I'm trying to get at is that how could this benefit other people? I mean, it's different for each person, yes, but what are some of the things that people who are watching this video, what would make them want to come and do the Psychomanteum?
Okay, so for grief, people across the board, whether people felt they had a contact with a deceased loved one, almost everybody felt that it was a peaceful state, that it shifted their grief, just allowed more peacefulness to come in the face of grief and emotions. But it's also beneficial, just brought, people talked about resolution, like the questions they had. Oftentimes people they want to say goodbye. It could be as simple as saying goodbye and having the chance to do that, or something they want to hear from the deceased. They might get confirmation or information through their experience, or just wanting to know somebody's okay. But oftentimes I see people come in that there's something traumatic about the death, like it's a child or it was an accidental death. And this experience can allow one, or suicide, things like that, to process their grief in a safe environment. And it's not really about whether they contacted the deceased loved one or not. That's the intention, but that it creates a space, like you're saying, a quiet space. One person went through and said, I have not spent 5 minutes even to think about this, to really give it the time to move through it. So just peacefulness, resolution, big shifts in perspective, a lessening of anger or resentment or sadness, fear, like a whole list of emotions is what we studied, and they all, across the board, people have reductions in different aspects of grief. So, and increases of reports of peacefulness and love. So those kind of more transpersonal states we think of.
Yeah, so, I mean, how many people that are transpersonal psychologists are using, or how many people are working the Psychomanteum to help people? I mean, you might not have the exact number, but is there a lot of people out there
that have Psychomantiums?
Yeah, that are doing this kind of work that you're doing?
I know 2 in the United States.
Yeah.
So it's, and Raymond Moody used to do it. I think he's kind of semi-retired from the work. I don't think he's doing it anymore. So, what I know of are 2 people. One of those people was on my research team. So, but that's just through, doing an internet search and trying to see.
Well, it's kind of cool because you work in a place called Mind Spawn, and it's a progressive. There's really nothing like, I've never heard of a group that does what you guys are doing here.
Yeah.
And there's so many things here. I mean, from the vibroacoustic chairs to the tank, the salt, the Epsom salt in it, and it's really about the mind. When we calm it, we can change neuron patterns within it. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so you can explain this better than I can. It seems to me that when we still the mind, we can change neuron patterns, we can cause healing to happen. And whether it's a trauma from when they were 5, or the death of a relative, or something else, am I kind of explaining that right? And so the Psychomanteum does that too, in connection to oneself or soul.
So, and changing, putting your brain in an optimal state for whatever your intention is.
Right.
You don't always want to calm the mind for different things. But so we do the array of peak performance, optimal performance for an athlete, to intense anxiety, neurofeedback to calm the mind. But yeah, we're talking about using tools, technologies, techniques that create an effect in the brain to allow neuropathways to change and to allow different subjective experience to arise. Yeah.
We want to talk about Justin Deschamps' experience in the Psychomanteum. We're going to transition to him.
Well, the Psychomanteum, it starts off where you go in with a question or something that you've been working with. I guess she said it for a week before. She gives you a little questionnaire as you fill it out, and based off of what you put on the questionnaire, that's what you go into the intention with the Psychomanteum with. So I went in there with my experience. I've been going through a housing situation with a co-owner, and we're kind of in a situation where talking to each other, and we have to come together to both make something happen, and he's kind of disagreeing with what's happening, and I'm trying to get him to, see what's really happening. And it's a very good example for something I have going on in my life just in general, where I feel like I'm constantly being presented with situations where, it's very clear and logical and reasonable when I think about it, but when I try to communicate that to somebody else, whether it's about food and their health, or something that's going on in their life, or just something in general, they can't face the reality, and they would rather stay in their own belief system than, see things for what they really are. So, for my own personal experience, I have to, get grounded and not get in the ego mind and try to force my control on this person. I just have to kind of accept their situation and let my expectation of what I want to have happen let go. What the Psychomanteum is we would do this little interview. We talk about what my intention was and what I was trying to do, and then I would go into this room. And as everybody knows, the Psychomanteum is a dark room that's blacked out windows, blacked out lights, blacked out walls, and the only thing that's in there is a mirror in front of you that's angled so that you can't see yourself, but you can see everything above your head. So when I went in there, my intention was to try to better get in that headspace of being in a holistic perspective, offering advice and help to somebody without having an attachment of whether or not they understood it or it worked for them or whatever. When I would feel the frustration, I would let myself feel it, and then I would step back and say, I have no attachment to the situation or the outcome. Everything's happening, for my own well-being, my own benefit, for my own journey. And then as soon as I would do that, everything would just kind of melt away into the background. And I would get this really warm, feeling of being embraced almost, or not being nearly as frustrated. The thing wasn't there anymore. So instead of being stuck in my solar plexus, I was in my heart energy almost.
So now you mentioned something where you were clearing blocks in your solar plexus when you were dealing with the house issue, and you were realizing that your expectations can, that kind of stuff. What energetically, the feeling, you got into the heart room, what happened inside of your body?
Well, as soon as I decided that I was going to start to release the energy, it was just kind of it was like exhaling, like a big relief, and then it's almost like when I was thinking about the frustration, all my attention was focused on the frustration. It was condensed into this point. But when I released it, everything kind of dissipated, and now I was just in this tranquil space of not thinking about the house or anything, just kind of being completely open.
So you felt expanded, or did you feel relaxed, or you just felt...
I felt, yes, expanded. I felt relaxed as well. Okay. I wasn't thinking about the situation as much as just being in the moment and the experience, and realizing that the love is there, the goodness is there. I just got to kind of focus on it.
So you felt somewhat of a totality.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so there's a correlation between, would you say there's a correlation between our thoughts and them restricting us from our total experience? Is there a correlation between the two? I mean, thoughts constricting or thoughts not constricting? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the amazing things about the mind spa in general is that, we went in there with an intention and a process about the thoughts. And so thoughts were very constricting. The thought, just the thought, that whole scenario I've built inside myself is a very constricting thought pattern that I can get myself in when I let it, take over.
Yeah, because think about the beginning. I got there about 3 o'clock, and we didn't actually get started until 4. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
So we spent an hour discussing and going through and wondering how we should do it and all that kind of stuff. And so we might have had less time. We got many things, but anyways, the point. What more importantly is about our feelings inside. So, did you find healing inside of yourself?
I did. As soon as I started to release myself from those attachments, I felt immediately better. I wasn't as stressed. I wasn't as frustrated. There wasn't a feeling of despair or I can't get myself out of the situation, because that's ultimately what that particular issue was that I was working on at the time. The house was one example, but it's the greater issue of I'm constantly, having to let go of my expectations when it comes to other people, and not be trying to control everything so much.
Right, and this experience was consuming you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, would you say that letting go would be healing for other people physically?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so what would you say that people could expect on the Psychomanteum? You got this experience, but what other things people could expect?
Right. Well, Psychomanteum is amazing because it kind of creates a completely stimulus neutral environment for you where there's just not a lot happening other than what you bring into it and what you're intending to do. So you're kind of in like a thought experiment room, or a playground of the mind, so to speak, where you can actually think about these things, without the radio or the kids or whatever it is that's distracting you in your life.
And did anything paranormal happen later?
Towards the end, when I was in the Psychomanteum, I was constantly bringing up things that would frustrate me and then releasing them. So after I'd done this about 10, 20 times with various things, I kind of had this experience where I was just completely tranquil and open. And the light in the room kind of started to fade in and fade out. At one point, it looked like this figure was standing behind me with enormous hands, which the image, when I think about it, is kind of disturbing, but the feeling I was getting was like, you're embraced. This is here. This is where you want to be, kind of the feeling. That's the message I was getting. And then it kind of morphed into this like clown mask, or old-fashioned opera mask from like the Renaissance era, and it also had this feeling of like, you're on the right path, or this is what you've been looking for. Because I've been dealing with this kind of situation, it's been frustrating me for a while,
So what's the key lesson that you gained from your experience in the Psychomanteum? I know you talked about letting go, but what could you give back to everybody else about what you brought forward for them to learn?
Sure. Well, just the significance of your thought patterns and what you're creating for yourself. I mean, when you think about things, you're creating rhythms and patterns in your mind, and those patterns linger in your mind. If you're thinking about a certain thing and how horrible it is and how much you hate it, then you're literally creating that experience inside of you. So you've got to honor your creation, so to speak, or your creations will honor you. So if you're constantly creating something negative, then that's what you're going to reap. But you always have the choice to change it and do something else. It's not so much what happens to you isn't as important as how you feel about it. And that feeling about it part is very underlooked in our present life and society. So the mind spa in general was amazing. I have not encountered a place where they focus so much on the mind and how it integrates with reality. I mean, there's something between the stimulation that you can have with your eyes, the random stimulation, because it opens up different neural pathways that you normally don't use. I mean, that's a huge facet that a lot of people don't get exposed to. So the mind spa in general is just a phenomenal concept and idea, and I can't wait to go back down there and see what else they have. So.
Very cool. Is there anything that you would like to tell people that are going to watch this video and listening, that what is it, something that I haven't asked you that they really need to know about the Psychomanteum or your work to help them?
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things. Yeah. I think that the Psychomanteum sounds it could sound scary or bizarre, or like I said, when I started doing the research on the team, I thought, no way, no way do I want that experience. But it's actually very safe, comforting environment to engage a process, and I hold it in that way, that it's a confidential setting that people can feel safe to go into feelings that are really hard. And I'm actually honored to work with people in their grieving state and to see transformations that occur and help them integrate that. But as well, I think it's important to know also that it's normal and natural to want to talk to your deceased loved ones, and that it's not, it's actually normalized within the medical field during bereavement to have what they call apparitional experiences, or they call them hallucinations. That's not a term I like, but to have auditory or visual experiences of your deceased loved one is actually normal. We know enough about this now from a scientific point of view that it's nothing to be ashamed of or to have to hide. And this, I think, is a socially sanctioned place, the Psychomanteum process, to explore these things. If you want to have that experience, about 50% of people feel they have a contact experience that self-report that come through Psychomanteum. We haven't seen anything harmful about it. It's it's basically, I just want to normalize it for people, that wanting to contact or talk to a deceased loved one is not abnormal. It's really normal during grief, and that's why I offer this service.
What an amazing thing for people that have gone, the families have gone through hospice and connecting up with other hospices and stuff like that for grief counseling. And you know, because there's a process in grief that we have to go through in order to let go of that deceased loved one, or let go of the pain actually that's losing that deceased loved one. And I think that's incredible. I think it's incredible work that you're doing. I'm excited that I got to experience it. I'm excited that you know, Justin got to experience it, and we're going to be able to help other people just by letting them know about the Psychomanteum, because I didn't even know what it was up until 4 months ago.
Yeah.
And and then I met you, and then I met Dr. Moody, and so it really has helped me just knowing.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know this, I mean, I studied paranormal. I'd done what's called scrying.
Yeah, which is
you know, which is similar. And but this was probably the most intense experience I've had with scrying. Because I've used candle flames and everything else to focus, but it didn't bring me to this level.
I have a bias that I think it's part of the whole process versus just if I just said, hey Jeremy, go sit in the Psychomanteum, and I didn't bring your intentionality and explore your grief with you first, that it might not have had as profound of an effect, and then helping integrate afterwards. But I also wanted to mention that I also offer it for consciousness exploration or other questions. That's what Justin went through it for. So.
And so, what is your website so that they know?
It's my name, www.RebeccaMerz.com. So it's REBECCAMERZ. That's M as in Mary, ERZ as in zebra. So.
Perfect. Yeah. And so they can contact you at Mind Spa or through your website.
Through my website, there's contact information for Mind Spa. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.